At the start of the new year, Ioannes continued once more the campaign. His final target at the Hungarian border was the independent town of Belgrade and the surrounding region, although it was a race against time to ensure that his forces would want to capture it and not the Hungarians. Once it was captured though, the whole of the north would be secure, and Ioannes could start the expedition to Italy, the cradle from which the Roman Empire was born. In the east, Alexios faced a difficult prospect of being surrounded by two Seljuk armies that prevented him from escaping. Against one, he could have beaten them, but together would have had a strong possibility of destroying his army due to overwhelming odds. An attack would force a conflict that he would have little chance of winning, so with bated breath his army held their ground ready to defend against the Turks. Hello everyone, I'm your host Warrior Angel. Welcome back to part 4 of The Phoenix Rises. In the last episode I left Alexios commander Seljuk in an uncomfortable position. He's outnumbered 2-1 by the enemy forces, and he's unable to retreat back into Ankara thanks to being in the enemy's zone of control. Having a look for their forces, they have a lot of skirmishing cav, and I hate fighting against us, so I decide just to withdraw from the battle and leave him there. If the enemy decides to attack him, he can then retreat back into Ankara in the next turn. With nothing else then to worry about, I end the turn. During the end turn phase, now I was quite surprised to see what the Seljuks had in mind for their turn. After watching them eliminate the small rebel army in their lands at the moment, I was surprised to see that instead of laying siege to Iconium, they decided to take the army currently outside it, south towards the rebel faction down there, presumably I guess, to lay siege to it either the next turn or the one after. More interesting though, out of the armies outside Ankara, instead of trying to attack Alexios and eliminate him completely, Captain Nau sends his forces down south to lay siege to Iconium. Well, the larger army under the command of Bahadir Seljuk decides instead to head into Roman lands, presumably to lay siege to Nicaea at a later date. This worked out pretty well for me, as Alexios can actually combat these forces one-on-one, where he would have a better chance of winning than if the army stayed together. During the start of the next turn now, I first of all have a new candidate for adoption, Theopemptos, who originally I looked at his stats and thought he was relatively good as a governor, until I noticed this very last trait, underhanded. As you can see, if it goes down to the bottom, you can see -1 loyalty, a very bad penalty on tax income coming out, so I quickly decided to avoid recruiting him. I had the option then as a mission to trade a new priest. If I did that, I would get florins from the guild, and both the Pope and the Theologians Guild will be appreciative of my efforts, so I decided to accept the offer. As against civil war, unfortunately, in both Hungarian and Ankara, with buildings getting damaged and citizens being killed. Unfortunately, though, there's nothing I can really do to stop this, apart from try my best to retrain and repair the garrison currently stationed in these towns. As you can see, though, in Iconium in particular, it's having problems, no doubt down to the army that's currently staying siege to it at this moment in time. But unfortunately, later on, I will be able to deal with this. But first of all, I might as well take advantage of the mission and recruit a priest for the region. As you can see, I haven't got much money either this turn, thanks to trying to start a new bunch of buildings this turn up from the queue. So I'll just go for the rest of the things. As you can see, Corinth has now had his leather tanner and tailor, so there's no doubt building the garrison square. As well as that, I've got a whole bunch of recruitment things to do, and the news that Iconium has been attacked. The next thing I had to decide is where to send Alexios' army. Do I send it west to try and stop Seljuk from attacking Nicaea, or send it south to relieve Iconium? I decided that Nicaea will not be attacked for another turn, and even then they need to lay siege. So I sent Alexios' army down towards Captain Nau in the south. He decided to retreat the first time round, but I continued the attack, and in the second round was able to bring him to battle. As you can see, the balance of power is very much in my favour, and I outnumber him, so I decided just to auto-resolve the battle. Unfortunately, even though I had a victory, I was hoping to have lost as many men, but he managed to win the battle anyway. So I managed to have a few prisoners, and I decided to try and ransom them back for a small sum of 245 florins. Unfortunately, the Seljuks once again decided to decline my offer, forcing me to kill them. And the survivors decide to rush back into Seljuk lands. This gives me an opportunity now to be able to send his forces up towards Seljuk and hopefully be able to attack him in the upcoming few turns. Once I make sure that Alexios' army continues to head towards Seljuk, I take another second just to check out Ankara and Iconium, make sure that I am repairing and retraining my troops. before having a look at the other eastern provinces to see what troops I can actually bring to try and reinforce Alexios' army. Unfortunately, I don't have that many, and I'm unable to recruit any new ones really, thanks to the lack of money at this turn. So I send 2 units of spearmen, 1 unit from Dardania, and the other from Sinia, over then to try and head up north to be able to eventually join up with Alexios' army up there. I also take the other 2 units that were originally intended for the garrison and Anconian and send them over to Anconian to be able to take over as the garrison in the following turn. Finally, then I decide as well to take the garrison I had at Iconian, which proved then to be a mistake later on. But for now, he was going to be extra troops for me to use up against the Seljuk army. Over in the western provinces, Ioannes has started the campaign once more after spending the winter with his family in Skopje Castle. His next target is the independent town of Belgrade up in the north. If he is able to capture that, then the western borders with Hungary will be secure, allowing him to carry on with the western expansion. Unfortunately though, I have no idea what's going on up there in regards to the Hungarian army, so I tried to send a spy up. Unfortunately though, it's going to take another turn for him to get close enough to the town to tell me the information that I want. And I decided, as it is currently under rebel hands, I'm going to risk it and send the army up north, hopefully to be able to lay siege in the upcoming turn. I need to ensure that enough of their garrisons left in place in Skopje to keep the population under check, so I decided to leave behind a unit of Katavatoi spearmen as well as one of my Toxote archers, as once the castle is converted over to a town, it should get some free upkeep, which will be quite useful for me. So sending the army up north, unfortunately the fog of war is still obscuring me from finding out what's going on, so I decided to go for something a bit unorthodox. Nicolaus the Unorthodox, my patriarch, she can get close enough to a town to find out what's going on, as well as start converting the populace, and as you can see there's a Hungarian army quite close by. It might lay siege to the town during the next turn, I'm unsure. I'll just have to see what they do and go from there then. As I moved the camera down, I noticed the alerts in the corner. It seemed that Alexios was severely wounded when relieving Anconian from the Seljuks, not only causing him to have -2 from his hit points, but also giving a massive -25% to the movement points. It might have been worth trying to consider getting a new general to lead the army, but Alexios is a proud man. He's not willing to allow the fact that he's severely injured to stop him from obtaining the glory he seeks. So he will continue to lead the army, at least for the meantime. He may recover, who knows at this point. I took him in and then just to go through the western provinces, making sure that all the towns and castles have a garrison that I'm happy with, as well as sending up a small army to join up with Ioannes' forces up in the north to give him some greater numbers up there. After all that then I decided to end the turn. As the end turn phase began, Anconian actually fell completely. It revolted against my rule and re-established itself once more as belonging to the Seljuk Empire, forcing my garrison out of the town. This is unfortunate because it has actually got a strong enough garrison now to cause some problems when I decide to attack. During the Seljuk's turn, they've decided instead of going after Nasinia, to try and take out these small little armies that I've got scattered around, which was originally intended to try and reinforce Alexios' army. Whether or not that Seljuk managed to get some information enough to know that they were trying to reinforce him, and decided to try and engage them early, I'm unsure at this point. But against such overwhelming odds, I had no choice but to cause my men to retreat as much as possible to try and get them away and save them for another time. At the start of my turn now, I get the alert that Iconian is revolted once more. This is going to be unfortunate, and I imagine Alexios is going to be pretty pissed at this point, considering that he just recently captured it. It looks like he's going to have to try and do some extreme methods in the future. Ioannes has also got a new candidate for adoption, whose name is Alexios, who, looking at him, seems to be a pretty good general on the whole. He's a bit of a social drinker with a noble in battle, and his conscientious trainer allows me to get higher morale and more movement points. I also have a mission now for the Council of Nobles to tackle Belgrade, which fortunately for me the Hungarians haven't actually attacked, so it gives me the opportunity now to rush in and lay siege to the town before they arrive. I did decide though I'm going to try and be sneaky and try and get my spy in to give me some more information and maybe even open the gates in a future turn. As you can see then, he decides to try and grab one of the guards while on patrol. Will he be able to pull this off though? Yep, he's managed to pull it off now. He's dressed as one of the guards. This will allow him access into the town, and hopefully will give me more information, and as I said, be able to open the gate as well. I've got 24% chance of doing so, and looking at the garrison, they've got these quota axemen, which will be quite a bit worrying. I have to be careful if I decide to fight the battle and send Ioannes himself in. But otherwise, I've got mainly Slav levies and spear militia and a few levy archers. Nothing really for me to worry about. In fact, I imagine it'd be quite the easy battle in the upcoming turn. So skipping through all this then, I decide then to start getting rid of the alerts. I also managed to get 600 florins, as you saw there, from the Theologians Guild for building a priest in Iconium. That was pretty nice to see. And I also got a new family member, Sergius, who, having a look on the family tree, I noticed now Anna Carmenos and her husband's first daughter. Sorry, son. Whoops. Fame. So little Zini's now got a cousin. How sweet. Everyone else now, I think my new bishop has now got a level piety, and Theophorus has now got +1 influence, that will help me out in diplomatic negotiations in the future. And it seems that my spy, who managed to get into Belgrade, Paraskephitus, managed to become a bit more inconspicuous, become a bit better at actually being more subtle. So I decided to lay siege now finally to Belgrade. Unfortunately, I can't open the gates with my spies, so I'm going to have to rely on traditional siegecraft. That will be coming up in the next turn. I also see that there's a Geonosian diplomat within range of Belgrade, so I sent my diplomat I had in the area out to try and negotiate with him, and allow Alexios to carry on converting the populace over to the true faith, or the Orthodox faith anyway. After moving around some of my garrison forces in the western provinces, such as moving a garrison to Sofia and moving my weakened unit Scoutatory spearmen over to Corinth ready to get them replenished, I go through the regions just to see if there's anything new I can build, taking advantage of my money. In Dehashion, I am tempted to build a stables here, as use Dehashion as a recruitment center for my melee infantry. But I did notice down in Corinth that it does give me access straight away to a knight stable, which will give me access then to strategy, rather than just units of mounted aquitae. So it's still something I'm a bit worried about and have to decide what to do. But in the meantime, I decided to go ahead and just build a blacksmith here in Corinth, and then over into Hashia and cancel the stables. I can always build it up again later on. Over in the eastern provinces now, the first thing I do is send Alexios' forces straight towards Seljuk and his army currently rampaging for my lands. It's going to take a few turns, but I've got a bit of a plan. I'm going to use Captain Marianos' unit. Instead of taking him to Smyrna, I'm going to put him in between the two armies. Seljuk seems focused at the moment on trying to eliminate the units I've got scattered around the region, and hopefully that will draw him close enough to Alexios' army to be able to attack him in the following turn. I did have a look then to see whether it's worth me trying to capture Iconium once more, but as you can see, they've got a large garrison in place, despite it only belonging to me last turn, and I decided instead to send the troops intended for Iconium over to join Alexios' forces. Finally then, in terms of building and that, I had a look at Ankara and decided I was going to build a small Orthodox church to try and convert the populace over. Unfortunately, this wasn't really worth it, as I found out, I think, in the next turn. But it's just one of those things I thought at the time it was a good idea. Before I decided to end my turn, and I go through my agents to try and sort them out a bit. Cosmas, my merchant, has been trying to make his way east to join the Silk Road and try and get some income for my empire. Fortunately, though, he keeps stopping at every single town and castle that he seems to be coming into, no doubt trying to sell his own personal goods and make a bit of money instead of trying to put it into my coffers. Theophorus up in the north continues to try and head west to speak to the Norwegians and Danish, hoping to at least try and get trade rights with them, if not an all-out alliance, as having their money will be quite useful when I decide to take the fight to the western factions and try and capture the Roman lands once more. After going through everything else then, I decided then to eventually end the turn, as there was nothing else I wanted to do at the moment. As you can see now, my fleet is continuing to head around Spain. I'm planning to take the diplomat that's currently on the fleet up to Scotland to try and get an alliance with them, because that might be handy against the English. As you can see then, Ankara has also fallen once more to Seljuk hands. They decided to rebel. That is quite unfortunate, and it's going to force Alexios to try and take some more extreme methods, I think, to keep the populace in order. Something he's not really wanting to do. He is quite a chivalrous man by nature. But sometimes, to his mind, sometimes harsh means are the way to achieve a victory. As you can see now, Seljuk has fallen for my trap. He's tried to attack Marianos' unit. As you can see, it's such overwhelming numbers, so that Marianos tries to draw him a bit closer towards Alexios' army. He just follows through, he tries to attack once more, and against such overwhelming odds, he has no choice to fight. He's unable to retreat any further at the moment. So I didn't really want to fight it, so I decided instead just to auto-resolve. As you can imagine, I lost, but it allowed him to retreat into Baris. That should hopefully give him a chance to replenish his forces later on. Over in Ankara now, they send a garrison out to try and combat the former garrison of 3 men, and now Seljuk is in a prime position for me to attack with Alexios' forces in my next turn. At the start of my turn now, I get a notification that Ankara has entered into open rebellion against the Empire. As you can imagine, given the history of the Empire and their view upon rebellions, this isn't going to go down too well, and Ankara is going to be facing some harsh justice once an army gets up there to deal with them. I got a couple prisoners released as well, which is quite nice, and a new candidate for adoption. Philophios does look like a half-decent commander, but I decided to not take him on for the moment, just simply because I've got enough commanders in the west already, and I need to keep track of my money at the moment. I do have a couple of new family members, as you can see, Methodios Angelos and Ariadne Komenos. It did take a little while to try and find her on the family tree. As you can see, I was focusing mainly on the left-hand side, and before cottoning on eventually that Adrianos and he's got several kids, including Alexios. So I decided to move over, and there she is, just recently born. As you can imagine, there's quite a big age gap between Alexios and his siblings, but I'm sure he loves them regardless. After this then, we took the opportunity to go through a couple more notifications, but more interestingly on the diplomatic screen, the Crusader states have entered into war with the Seljuks. Hopefully this may benefit me, but we'll have to see what happens. Now the first thing to do is send Alexios' forces straight towards Seljuk, and he's fallen for my trap. He's now close enough for me to engage straight away. As you can see, he decided not to run away, and the balance of power is very much 50-50. As slightly more men than them, but he is the better commander. And looking at his forces, the main concern I have is the fact that he does have a number of skirmishing cav, which I can deal with, assuming that I can actually get close enough. But my main problem is the fact they got Armenian cavalry. As you can see, they are really good, powerful, heavy cavalry, and something I'm going to have to keep in mind in the battle. But I should be able to win, so I decided to fight this battle on the map. Men of the Empire, today we deal with those Turkish bastards who have been helping themselves to our food, our wine, and our women. The cowards that think themselves brave by attacking our patrols, too scared to fight a real army when they have the opportunity. Today, we will show them how real men fight, and as they run home to their mothers and wives like whipped dogs, they will remember the pain of Roman steel. So once more to battle, my brave men, keep those shields up and those spears ready, and they won't stand a chance. After those fierce words from Alexios, the army starts to march. I decided to put them on top of this hill on the right between the two armies, hoping that the elevated position will give me some advantage against the Seljuks, especially when it comes to missile fire, as it would allow my troops to not only fire from an elevated advantage, but hopefully allow my skirmishers to throw their javelins over my men rather than into the rear and causing friendly fire. While my troops get into position themselves, I'll take the opportunity to have a look at the Seljuk army, see what deployment they've decided to go with. As you can see, in the centre, they've decided to put their spear militia with their Turkish archers in the front line in a similar approach to me. They got their bodyguard in the rear, and on both flanks they got their skirmishing cav, 4 large units, which is going to be a slight concern of mine if they decide to attack. I couldn't see any sign of their Armenian cavalry, which means that they're probably hiding in the tree line somewhere. Although personally looking at it, I wouldn't imagine those palm trees give them much in the way of cover, but as far as the game's concerned, that is the case. For the next couple of minutes, a game of cat and mouse took place between our forces, with me trying to move forward and them retreating. However, when I was trying to get into my latest position here, they decided to change their mind. As you can see on their left flank, their skirmishing cav decided to rush straight towards my army. and I was slightly concerned that with my Toxite archers in the front line, that the skirmishers decided to actually engage my Toxite melee, that their charge might cause enough damage to them that I didn't want to see it done. So I decided to halt the advance, and while I took the opportunity then to readdress the spear line, my Toxite archers decided to start shooting at their skirmisher cav. Managed to kill about 20 of them within the first volley, as well as help from my javelins in the second line. As you can see then, the rest of the army decided to move forward slightly, including their right flank, which has brought more skirmishers to the battle. I then decided to move my Toxite archers back, hoping that the heavier armor of my spearmen should be able to defend themselves against the arrow fire, and allow my Toxite and my javelin men to be able to cause some damage. The enemy has started going to counter-Brian's circle, which is annoying. I find my troops find it harder to actually hit them, but they continue to try and cause some casualties. And as I go over to the flank then, I try to consider bringing my Turcopole archers, the Turcopole cavalry I should say, over to try and attack them from the flank. But it seems that the enemy have a change of mind. They start bringing their troops back towards their rear lines and retreat their skirmishing cav, at least for the moment. As the enemy army decides to retreat, I take a look to make sure my troops are relatively okay, not that many casualties. As you can see, I did leave a few bodies behind. I managed to cause a few casualties of the skirmishing cav. Not too bad in terms of the first blow of the conflict. But as they decided to send the skirmishing cav up there, I turned my Turcopole cavalry after them. I think by this point it was a stupid choice, as they outnumbered me by 2 to 1, and they're attacking me as they're retreating, while my cavalry attempt to try and catch up. I lost the unit then, which was unfortunate, especially as then I encountered their Armenian cavalry up on the hill. Not the best position for some skirmishing cav to be in, especially there, so I lost the unit by this point pretty quickly. I decided then with the main army to try and continue to move them forward, putting the spearmen in the front this time. And as I meant to move them, they decided to charge once more with their skirmishing cav. So I had to cancel the order and get my troops ready to engage them once more with missile fire. You can see the Toxite now starting to line up pretty nicely. Enemy spread out in front of them, should be a few hits at least. And off they go, archery fire straight into there, couple of hits, 1 or 2 deaths, not too bad. You see they are still trying to bring their Turkoman cavalry and their Ajins closer and closer. But I do have the advantage when it comes to missile fire, so despite the fact they are trying to engage in counterbind circles at this point. However, my spearmen are weathering the storm of arrows coming towards them pretty well, not many casualties between the regiments, while my own missile troops continue to pour in fire against them and causing casualties as they go. As the skirmishing battle continues, I decided to send my Sifona Torres over to try and attack the skirmishing cav, just because I haven't really used them much, and I'm hoping that being distracted by the spearmen, they won't notice my troops getting in closer into the last minute. Just on the safe side though, I put them in loose formation to hopefully protect them a bit more against the arrow fire. Fortunately though, the Turkish cavalry do notice them, and they do take a couple of hits as they get closer and closer. But I have to admit, I was a bit disappointed with them. Maybe it's just down to the fact that there's only 20 of them. But as far as I can tell, only one of them I was actually able to set off a charge. And although it was pretty impressive watching a fireball shooting out, but as you can see, it just didn't work. Nothing was shot at, apart from one. Did cause a couple of hits, I think, but nothing was killed. So despite the fact now they had no casualties, I had no choice but to retreat them as they were suffering casualties thanks to the overwhelming missile fire. So I decided to bring them back behind my lines once more. It seems in the meantime, as you can see, the enemy skirmishing cav decided to retreat back to their line, and the whole army is moving, no doubt to form some sort of battle line ready to engage my troops. I take the opportunity then to try and redress my lines and move them a bit closer towards the enemy. So first of all, my spearmen go in first, and this time around I continue to put the Toxite archers in the front line, ready to try and cause some casualties with their missile fire, while the rest of the force gets into position. However, when I was doing this, as you can see, then the Seljuk armies started to advance towards my forces completely. So it was a case of trying to rush my troops into position before the enemy get close enough to stop me. I continue to put my javelin behind the spearmen in order to be able to provide supporting fire over their heads. And I put my bodyguard and his troops both Amintas and Alexios' forces on the right flank, I should say, while my Siphonatiers get into position ready to try and provide some support as necessary. As you can see now, I can finally spot the heavy cavalry up on their right flank, something to keep in mind, and while I move into position, they've decided to try and engage with fire arrows. Fortunately, not doing that many casualties. My scout artillery are doing pretty well. My archers decided to carry on going to the front line, although they noticed then that I still had them on skirmishing mode and decided to try and pull them back, and I went ahead then and went to deactivate it. Fortunately though, my javelin men weren't actually in skirmish mode, only my archers, so just making sure they were disabled. I have to remember to do this in future. I find the skirmishing mode not too bad doing this game in particular, but the rest of them can be annoying. As you can see now, the Armenian cavalry have charged straight into my territory, causing a lot of casualties with that first charge. We're taking very little in return. I have no choice now but to try and engage them, to try and hold them back before they break through my line. As you can see, I managed to kill a few of them, but the charge was so overwhelming. So I sent one army of Amintas' forces over to try and deal with the Armenian cavalry, while Alexios takes around the flank, ready to try and engage the enemy spearmen, hopefully to try and cause a rout if possible. In the meantime, my spearmen continue to hold the front line, and my missile troops continue to pour in fire against the enemy troops. But my main concern, though, despite the fact the battle wasn't going too bad, was the Armenian cavalry, but I'm hoping that Amintas' bodyguard will be able to kill as many of them as possible, and hopefully not cause them to be much of a problem later on. When Alexios gets into position, I did notice then that the enemy bodyguard was starting to get into position to try and charge. No doubt tried to kill Alexios and cause the rest of my army to retreat. I did get them to charge into the rear of the spear militia, hoping that they were able to get them to retreat. However, this isn't Attila, where that could easily happen, and instead the spear militia remain in one place while the enemy bodyguard charges into Alexios' forces and kills a couple of them on the charge. I did try to bring my scout artillery unit through the spear militia to try and engage the enemy bodyguard. However, it didn't quite work as well, and Alexios still suffered a few casualties, in fact losing nearly 7 or 8 men in one go. I've still got a few casualties, but the battle is still going relatively balanced at this moment. It could go either way. We'll have to see what happens later on. As the battle rages on, I bring Alexios and his bodyguard behind the Toxote archers, ready for him to be able to be used in a more supportive role as the situation demands. Amintas and I continue to fight their way through the spear militia, and while I was trying to move troops around, I noticed that the Armenian cavalry had decided to come back up and try and charge once more, so I sent Amintas after them. The scout artillery unit that was trying to fight Zelolodovil and his bodyguard was decided to try and march after him, and instead I used them to try and get a flank or rear charge on the enemy spear militia, hoping that I could drive them away and allow me to start getting a bit of a rout going on. Amintas and his troops go after the Armenian bodyguard, but it seems that I actually managed to deal with them. The Kotoritoy survivors must have managed to kill them off pretty easily, because I don't think I encountered them again. So I sent the spearmen back off after them, and sent the Afanatoy into a flanking position, ready once more to try and deal with the enemy spear militia that's still fighting me on my front line. About this point of the battle, I only had half my army remaining. Unfortunately for me though, the balance of power is still relatively balanced. I still got a chance of winning. And with that, I sent Alexios' forces into the flank of the enemy bodyguard, despite his low numbers, hoping to cause some casualties, to get them maybe to retreat again. Alexios' charge managed to drive the enemy bodyguard back, just enough to try and give my troops some respite in the centre. No doubt though, the enemy bodyguard will turn around and try to engage my troops once more. So with that in mind, I bring Alexios' forces back towards the rear of the Toxote, hoping to be able to bring a supportive charge in again if the situation calls for it. Back on my left flank though, things seem to be a little bit better. Amintas and his bodyguard managed to drive off a lot of the enemy forces, and there's not that many enemy left. So I decided to try and use them to do a rear charge into the back of that huge blob of spear militia in the front line. As you can imagine, spear militia again faced with a charge from behind by heavy cavalry, not the best combination for them, and they started to waver pretty easily. With the bit of respite now in the centre thanks to that charge, I bring one unit of scout-toy spearmen to try and attack the enemy bodyguard from behind, hoping to try and take the opportunity to kill the enemy general. Once he's killed, the enemy other troops should be able to retreat pretty easily. As you can see now, the spear militia in the centre have started to rout, and they've now lost half their men. The balance of power is still relatively in my balanced, I should say, at this point. It could go either way. My scouts are now trying to charge into the rear, but it's still annoying the fact that they can't really do it properly, I find. As you can see, only a few of the men are actually engaged in the enemy bodyguard. Scouts are now pursuing, as well as Mintas, and I decided to try and bring everyone in now as much as possible to try and kill off the enemy general. Once they're killed, it shouldn't be too much of a problem. I sent my other scout-toy unit down to try and engage the Turkish archers, hoping that my spearmen's better quality would have done them in good stead. However, I found later on that wasn't the case, that the enemy just has too much overwhelming numbers for their tired forces. As you can see now, the victory seems certain for my troops against the enemy bodyguard. They managed to kill quite a few of them in the process, and only 8 of them left, and as the numbers continue to go down. Thankfully, Amyntas' charge from the rear has also been able to help out a great deal, and it won't be too long now until the enemy general is dead. In the meantime, though, as you can see, the scouts are trying to fight valiantly against their Turkish archers, but however, victory does seem pretty certain for them, thanks to their overwhelming numbers. My troops continue to try and kill the enemy general, but I decided to bring Amyntas' forces down to try and help engage the enemy Turkish archers. But thankfully they managed to kill the Saracen general. With that, most of their troops start to retreat in short order, especially once they start bringing in other troops to try and support them. My Toxtay archers continue to try and attack the Turkish archers, and my other troops start coming in now to deal with the survivors. Heavy cavalry, as you can imagine, would have been pretty shaken for the enemy archers, I should say, to deal with. And all of a sudden now they started to rout as Alexios' forces charge in, while Amyntas heads down to try and deal with the other archery unit there. One charge later, they're broken. I had the opportunity then to end the battle, but decided to continue it in the hopes to try and capture as many prisoners as possible and kill what survivors they have, so I don't have to try and deal with this army anymore in Roman lands. So I fast forward time just to take an opportunity to try and kill as many of them as possible. After a minute, I decided to end the battle. As you can see, I only got an average victory. Despite managing to kill or capture pretty much the entire enemy army, I lost 900 men in the process. This is something I can imagine that Alexios is going to feel quite guilty about. To my dear Irene, it is the evening after my victory against the Saracens that I've been terrorizing Roman lands for the past year. Yet I find myself unable to celebrate. Although I've managed to capture or kill the entire enemy force save a few stragglers, does it count as a victory when over 2/3 of my men lay dead on the ground? Perhaps a Pyrrhic victory at best. The air over the camp is solemn tonight, with too many men and friends dead. Once the wounded are able to move, I will take the army to Barras Castle to allow the men to recover over the winter and to recruit new soldiers to replace them. I would like it if you and the children would meet me there and stay for a while. It would be nice to see you all, and be reminded of other things apart from death. Your loving husband, Alexios. After the battle, I had the opportunity to decide what to do about the prisoners I've captured. I decided to ransom them and hoped that the Seljuk's would actually pay this time rather than force Alexios to have to kill the survivors. Fortunately, though, they do accept, and the survivors then make their way back to Ankara, while I get a nice little sum of nearly 1,500 florins into my coffers. Alexios then decides to take the survivors of the battle down to Barras Castle to secure lodgings for them and not only allow the army to replenish and to be able to build new troops, but to give the survivors an opportunity to recover from their ordeal. I also decided then to try and send Captain Marcos and his 3 survivors' men back to Barras for them to be able to replenish their forces for the upcoming campaign as well. Meanwhile, over in the western provinces, Ioannes is still laying siege to the town of Belgrade up in the north. Before he attacks, though, I'd sent the reinforcements led by Captain Ioannes over to join him before attacking the town itself. As you can see in a second, the balance of power is very much in my favour, so I decided to just go ahead straight away and auto-resolve it. I did lose 410 men in the process, but I managed to capture the town and decided just to go ahead and occupy it. While I was checking out the new area of the map, which has been uncovered from the Fog of War, I did notice that the Venetians are starting to come onto my lands, so that could be something to keep an eye out for. And I finally picked up the announcement that I've got a shield bearer now in Alexios Doukas' return. As you can see, it does cause a slight problem morale on the battlefield, but it does increase his hit points, which is a nice little thing to have. So it might be worth keeping it for a while. I also get a notification from the Council of Nobles that they're happy with me capturing Belgrade, and have now given me 3 units of Toxite currently stationed in Constantinople for me to decide what to do with. For the moment, they're actually pretty content there. They're being used up with no upkeep whatsoever, thanks to being in a large town. But I decided to try and send some of them up to Belgrade to be able to act as a garrison when Ioannes decides to move out. I'm still decided what to do with him next, because it will be coming up into direct contact with the Western factions. I decided whether or not to go up through Venice and head down, or go down to Sicily, capture there, and head up through the peninsula up towards Rome to capture it and regain the ancient land once more. However, at the moment I'm not sure which way to go, and I'm going to have to decide in the next episode. Finally, before I end the turn, I just go for the different regions and take advantage of my newfound wealth to build a couple of buildings. At the moment, land clearance is a pretty good one for me, as it will increase population growth as well as money I'm making. But I also decided in a couple of regions to go a little bit different. In Arta, I decided to build a blister maker, figuring that blisters will be quite effective against the castles of the western factions when Ioannes takes the expedition west. As well, then up in Thessalonica, I decided to build a port finally. That will allow me to get some more income from trade, as well as a mine, which will give me a nice regular income as well, once it's built, of course. After I went through all the other regions, I decided to end the turn. Doing the final movements then, before my turn finished, I remembered to send a diplomat to speak with the diplomat from the Republic of Genoa, and I was hoping to try and just take advantage of getting a little bit of extra money from them. So I decided to go ahead and just get some trade rights. I was tempted to try and get map information as well, but I figured that it's not really that important if I remember why the Genoans are over in the far west. So I just decided to offer them trade rights, which they accepted. Otherwise, the rest of my troops start to get into position, and my turn finally finishes. I was quite surprised during the Seljuk Empire's turn to find that the Seljuks had actually sent an army to try and deal with Captain Marcos and the 3 remaining survivors of his spearmen unit that garrisoned Ankara up in the north. As you can see, I did try to save his life. I told him to retreat the first time round. Unfortunately, they decided to try and send the army still after him. A giant army which I believe actually had nearly 400 men, if I remember. Yes, 450 men against 4. Only 1 man was killed, but unfortunately the rest of the survivors died as well. Such a shame for such brave men. At the start of my next turn, I'm told that the Novgorodian Niaz is now dead, as well as being given a new mission by the Council of Nobles, who want me to send an emissary to the Kingdom of Denmark. I'm already doing this with Theophofus, and he should be arriving in the next couple of turns. Before ending the episode then, I move Alexios' army into Paris Castle, giving him and his men an opportunity to rest, as well as be able to retrain and re-equip the army for the upcoming campaign. Anconi and Ankara will have to face harsh Roman justice for rebellion, something that Alexios isn't really happy to do, but we'll have to see what his decision is in the next episode of The Phoenix Rises. Despite defeating the Turkish army that had been raiding Roman lands and killing the patrols, it left both Alexios' army as well as his spirit depleted. Once the wounded were able to march, Alexios took the men to Paris Castle, where he could finally deal with the aftermath of the battle and replenish his troops. The news of both Anconian and Ankara rebelling once more as Turkish loyalists seized control, Alexios faced the inevitable choice of having to punish the people with harsh Roman judgment in order to keep order and prevent future uprising. After securing the town of Belgrade, Ioannes took the opportunity to rebuild his army with the improved facilities in the western provinces, where he planned for the next step of the western expansion. The homeland of Italy called to him, though there was a choice whether to approach from the south by sea and take Sicily before heading north, or to march overland and attack the Venetians before heading south, a difficult choice for the young commander.